up from there. All right, so my name is Jerry Lacey. There's all my alphabet soup from SolidWorks. 25 years at Mesa, recognized a lot of my former students. Been at ASU in the instrument design and fabrication core facility for 6 years. And then a variety of different places in industry. So where to find configurations? On our feature tab at the very top is the third tab over is configurations. All right, once you click into that tab, it's going to pull up and show you. Now this is, I'll recognize 2022 here in a second. So this is a configured geometry. And if you've created a design table, you will see this, this link to the table. And then we have 4 grayed out and 1 that is with color that is the active configuration. So that's one of the ways you're going to tell which ones are active. And if I wanted to change, I would double click, or we can right click and show configuration as we go through that process. Okay, so when to use configurations? Separate parts would result in many files. What if scenarios for parts and assemblies? I have a concept. I'm not sure I like the way that sketch turned out. So I'm just going to create a configuration, suppress it, flip back and forth and say, oh, you know, this one did this one did this. And, you know, much what Dylan was saying was, if I suppress those, then I don't want to go back each time and unsuppress this one, suppress this one. Oh, wait a minute, I want to go check this one, suppress, unsuppress, you know. So the configuration is going to allow me to click through those and manage those suppression states. We said the simulation management and similar but different assemblies. Easier to adjust the sizing in assemblies, and then our toolbox hardware, fasteners, and components are going to fall into that category. So, you know, I always like to use the example of this is just a 1/4-20 socket head cap screw. There are, going by 1/8 of an inch, there are 30 lengths. Now multiply that by however many screws from an odd 80 all the way up to 1 or 2 inches, and we would have a lot of files. We don't want to manage each of those files. And if I needed to change this from whatever I've got 4 1/4 to 4 inch, I would have to replace, go through multiple steps to take that, that screw out, put another one in. With the configurations out of the assembly, I can just right click on it and say, no, I want this one. Checkbox, done. All right, everything kind of falls through there. So on our configurations tab, there's also display states. So I like to point those out because I think display states kind of is where some of the confusion comes in. And so configurations are your physical properties. So dimensions, suppressed, unsuppressed, to a certain extent colors. And then also, I was going to check on materials, so I just don't need to check on materials apparently. Display states are going to be how pretty you make it. So the hide show, the transparencies, your shaded with edges, hidden lines removed, you can manage all of those out of the display states, and then the appearances and colors. And both work with assemblies, parts, drawings, and the library features. So when you're in the configuration and you go to the bottom of that property manager or bottom of that configuration tab and right click, it's going to take you into properties. And I'll do that as an example. It'll give you the option to link it to the configuration so that each configuration could have a different color, have a different view state. All right, so how do you tell you have configurations without going to the configuration tab? You're in a sketch and you double click on the a dimension, you set a dimension, and there is nothing on this end that says you're going to be able to pick configurations. Also, we want to pay attention to this automatic address. Most everybody at some point has clicked in there and started typing, and it said, do you want to create this as an equation, a global variable, or whatever? That is our address for this dimension, and it's going to play a little bit of a part coming up into our configuration. On the other side, I have modified the address to be an overall length. or something that makes sense. I don't like to get too wordy, write a novel in there, because this is when ultimately we get into the Excel file. This is going to fill up a header cell that we probably don't want to get too awful big. All right, so we pay attention to that one. And now, because I have created that configuration, I have this little pull down, which wouldn't screen capture for me, but it basically says this configuration, all configurations are configurations that you want to select, right? And then these are sketch dimensions, so they're at sketch. Feature dimensions will have at boss extrude or something that relates back to that feature. Right, so all those visual clues. So the thing with equations, if you're going to start out knowing you're headed towards a design table, stay away from the equations. All right, we're going to do the equations in Excel and not have two places that could potentially be conflicting with each other. So under the equations, we have things like the global variables, the features, and then all those dimensions that we just created. So D1s, sketch 2s, chamfers, everything gets a value associated to it. And those become items that we can manage out of that design table. Let's see, so the design table will adopt the result. It will not carry the equation over into Excel. All right, and then with the actions occurring in two places, that was the problem. So this is on, if you do not see the equations or have not created an equation, we can show it under the options, feature manager, equations, and show. All right, our right-clicking at the top. We have part 1, and I want to add a configuration. After I've seen the default, one of the common problems is that if you right-click at that configuration or any other configuration, you're creating a derived configuration. All right, so don't use derived configurations until you're sure you really need it, because now you're saying I have a subset within this set and potentially a subset of a subset. Make it simple. This is already complex enough. You don't want to make it worse. All right, so avoid derived configurations until you've established the need. And then also you're going to have properties. Depending on what you want to show up in your bill of materials, your drawings, you will probably want to change over to the configuration name, and deciding what your configuration name will carry over into that associativity downstream data into your drawings of the parts. All right, so my recipe is do a manual entry first. You're building your seed part. You're figuring out some of the spacing, some of the overall size. So determine the common elements of, I could have different hole sizes. I could have a tap hole. I could have counterbore. At some point, we're going to generate so much complexity, it'll become apparent that I probably shouldn't have done that. Let's break those into two parts. So determine those common elements, start the sketching and creating the features for the default part. And then as you're going, if you know what you want to call them, do those naming of the dimensions as you go, or come back later and you can double click on them and add the names when you have a better handle on it. All right, so the naming convention is, we have a top level part that we're working with. So maybe it's a socket head cap screw. SolidWorks famous for the SHCS, times quarter 20 times whatever. For my example, I'm going to do a block that starts out 1 by 1. We'll go to 2 by 2, 3 by 3, nice block with a hole in it. So that's going to be my naming convention is BLK and then some values. The configuration tab, we want to add the configuration. Again, right mouse button on the default, on the part, that very top item, not the default configuration. And then when you add the next configuration, it will carry over those properties to a certain extent. And then we're going to modify the configuration properties. I go from 1 inch to 2 inch on whichever dimensions, or we change those as we change those dimensions. And then to make sure that the added configuration is active, I'm going to switch between them and say, yeah, it did what I want. That's an expected result. When we update the sketch or the feature dimensions using the modify box, we are going to select this configuration, because if we don't, it's going to default most of the time to all configurations, and well, that kind of defeats the purpose. And then you go back to the configuration again, double check, make sure it's working as you expected. Occasionally you'll have to do a rebuild if it's something a little more complex, and then if you jump directly into the design table, you're going to lose this kind of foundation material, this building up the first configurations to tie them together and figure out any issues you may run into. And then if you're using mate references were coming in unsuppressed. The last time I did it, they weren't suppressed. So you will have to right click on your mate reference and unsuppress it at the configuration level. I haven't seen it added to the design table or anything, but if it's unsuppressed in you create the mate reference, unsuppress it in the default. As you create new configurations, it should stay unsuppressed. All right, next we're going to configure the feature. That gives us like 2 instances, gives us our good start. Configuring the feature has the advantage of it doesn't require Excel. That you can have a quick method of adding a few configurations, and maybe if your part is only going to need 5 or 6, you don't have to go to the complexity of the Excel design table. And then so what we're going to do is right mouse button on a feature or sketch and configure feature, same terminology, and it's going to pull up a screen, hopefully there it is, to modify the configurations. If I'm at the feature level, I can double click on the sketch. I didn't expand that. I can double click on the sketch, and when those pop up, I can double click on any of those items and they will be added to this table. All right, so we can, oh, and then at the very bottom, create a new configuration. So my next block would be 5 by 3 by 10, I don't know. And I could type that in, I could put in my values, and when I hit apply, it's going to add that configuration to the list. For 2022, which I noticed is running 2021, so I will show you where it lives, but it's not there to click on just yet. So the configuration table, when I was kind of preparing for this, it was like popped up and I was like, oh, that's kind of new and nifty, something shiny to play with. So what this is going to do is in the options underneath the cosmetic threads for upgrade is now this new line that says create configuration tables on open. If you are already in the part with the configuration, I've found that I have to save it, and then this will pop up. If you're just opening it and it's turned on, then it comes up with the tables, the design table and the configuration table. All right, so what it's going to do is it's going to grab pretty much everything that what I was saying about adding to the modify box. It's going to grab everything out of this configuration tab and allow you to start changing dimensions, adding new configurations. And if it's not crazy data entry, you'll probably go along pretty quick with just this, with that, the table. All right, getting into the design tables. The search, start typing design table, it'll show up. You can right click and customize and turn on your table toolbar, and it will be the one with the Excel symbol, or the pull down, insert, all the way down to tables, all the way to Excel design table. That's going to launch the property manager that says, how do you want to create this? Blank, auto create, or from a file. If you have a template that you're working from and you can stay consistent, the from file is a little more difficult and you probably want to deal with the start. And then is it bidirectional or is it one way? So both ways, one way. If you double click on a dimension inside of your part and change 1 inch to 2 inch, it's going to either say, this is going to update the design table, or no, you can't do that. You have to go into the design table, make the change there, and then when you get out, it will update. So I typically do the allow model edits to update the file design table. It's just kind of a tinker with it, see what works. And then what is it going to see next time you open up the design table? New parameters, new configurations, warn when updating, and enable drop-down lists. Okay, so here's an example of a countersink used for machining. And so we have an aught through, well, looks like it went all the way up to the number 9 center drill, which is pretty big. I haven't ever seen one of those. All right, so it generates the geometry. It's adding a description. We can modify colors. There is my overall length, my diameter dimension. The A values is probably the tip. If we had different angles, we could put those in there. We can control a lot of those items. So if we edit the table, we're embedded inside of SolidWorks. This is going to be a window, and as soon as I click anywhere else in the work area, poof, it's updating, it's closing, it's back into your design. Edit table in new window is going to basically launch an Excel window, which is nice because with dual monitors, I can drag it off to the side, kind of go back and forth. And I've never really figured out if I should be saving that or just when I click out of it, if it's gonna close. So I always hit the save just to make sure that I'm not gonna lose anything. All right, so then we can take advantage of all of those geometries. So my final slide is the data set then. We have the header across the top is for the addresses or the property. And then we have configuration names, the description, the suppression states are going to be U or S. And then the part number is going back, the string D is reverting back to the description. So I can update those and change those. We have a lot of horsepower going on in all of the advantages of dealing with Excel. Also, all the complexity that comes with dealing with Excel. And then when exiting, the updates change and creates new. No empty rows. If I put a row between 4 and 5, 5 through 10 do not exist anymore. As soon as it sees that gap, done. All right, so you don't want to leave any gaps, or if you do leave a gap on purpose because you're kind of stopping it there as you develop the rest of your data set, that's kind of a good way to go. So any questions before I jump into the example? Did I mention this was going to be a whirlwind tour? All right, so we'll just do a new. And okay, do the part. All right, so under options, if you are in 2022, the allow cosmetic threads, the next line would be to add those configuration tables. And so if that's not. So to start off with, we need a part, and I am an S key. So I will be, let's just draw the box, and I like the box with the hole in it. The other one, yeah, it's going to mess me up. So I've already adopted habits that I said I would never adopt. And maybe it's not in here. Okay, I'm not going to find it easy. Well, what I'm looking for is the dimension that when you do the input, that it won't insert the dimension if you don't put a value in. So it's in there. I don't, again, I don't remember if it was in 2021. I've used 2022 for all of 2 months. So that's those brain cells are gone. All right, so we'll go ahead and apply it. I put in a 1 inch, and I want to name this the length. And like I said, I'll probably, if I was building this outside of a demo, I would choose the naming more abbreviated. So length, width. And even though I would say that these will always be equal, I still probably wouldn't apply the equal relation. I want these to be independent of each other. Even though I would draw the circle in here to generate the hole, I may want to suppress that hole. So it needs to be separate, and we need to manage those geometries. So when I extrude this out, we'll give it the 1 inch. There is no there isn't really a dimension name there. So if I double click, I'm going to be able to find the blue. Oh, now it goes over there. All right, let me have it. Oh, did I turn that on? Hello. Ah, thank you. I hardly ever have instant 3D on, so that definitely threw me. Well, all right, so we get that, and we'll just call that depth. And I'll forego jumping into the equations if you're interested in seeing how to turn those folders on. And you probably wouldn't recognize my my version of SolidWorks anyway, because none of this is there. I've turned those off, and I have the things that I use, like the solid bodies and the other items. All right, so let's just put a hole through there for reference. And we'll go line. Oh, we're getting a little jumpy there. Come on, you can find it. There we are. Find my relations, go to construction, get back into the select. We'll put that at the midpoint. So this is another one of those, if I always want it on center, I'm going to look for that relation. Otherwise, I'm going to put 2 more dimensions in there. Oh, I got tangency. Come on. And we'll make it on the midpoint and apply. Oh, yeah, that happens to me quite a bit when I get button happy. They put the dimension on the context menu, the right mouse button context menu, just close enough to the exit the sketch that it. All right, maybe not that big. How about 0.5? All right, we're going to extrude that through. And it will go through all or up to next. All right, so the first elements that I want to build, let's see, we name those. I'll pass on naming. So we jump over into the configuration. I go to my default. I look at the properties, and I'm going to apply the configuration name. And what's going to happen is, instead of having parentheses out here, those are just going to disappear, and that's going to let me know that I have that that part name. So right click, add configuration. We'll go with the 1 by 1 by 1, and that becomes my seed part. And even though it's the exact same thing as the default, I can always go back to the default. I totally get this thing messed up and go back to the default and have a new starting point. So my next configuration, back in there, add configuration. We go to the 2 by 2 by 2. And when I double click, I'm going to be able to, I don't have to go back into the sketch. I don't have to. And there is my pull down. So make sure that I go from 3 to 1. So basically the all configurations to this configuration. I'm going to do that each time. Okay, my OCD showing. I can't be 2.1. And by 2. All right, and then we hit the rebuild, Control B or Control Q. It updates. And then we said we're going to go do a verify. Does it switch back? Yeah, go ahead and rebuild. Almost. So apparently I missed that last one. I would like to say that I'm that good, but I'm not that good. All right, so to make the correction, we go back, we find the boss extrude, and we switch that over to this configuration, change it to 1 inch, hit OK, rebuild, and hopefully now it stays. All right, so the reason for the hole is that we're going to be able to see the suppression. We're also going to be able to, if we need to, control the depth if we put in a blind in condition. It's not going to change for through, all, up to next, or any of those. But we can modify the dimension for our diameter. Yes. Yep. Yeah, you want as many parts shoved in, or as many sizes, shapes under the same general common elements, that same general body, but I want to be able to control how big it is, what it's containing.
Is that the same as family parts?
Yeah, you could. It's a grouping. You can manage it that way. All right, so going into the configure feature is our next level. I've established a couple of instances. I configure the feature. We can double click, and so at the extrude level, the feature level, I'm only getting the depth, and I want to add the length and the width. So as I go through, let's make that just a little bigger. And I say I want to add my 3 by 3 by 3. Oh, and then it always catches me up there. All right, 3, 3, 3, apply, and OK. Now, if everything else is working, I can switch to the 3 by 3. And it updates. Pause there, it scared me a second. You're like, whoa, did it do it? All right, and when we go back through, just very quickly, again, double click or right click, show configuration. I should see these update as we go. And then we can build in different sizes. I'm making these cubes, but these could be rectangles. They could be, whatever shapes we need, as long as it doesn't violate. If I went to a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch and the hole blows it away, I'm probably going to end up with an error. All right, so we have those configure feature, and also if the tables that I mentioned were showing here, we could right click and we could see all those dimensions. Yeah, I haven't set up any configuration parameters to change it, but we'll do that in the design table just because it'll be fun. All right, so the insert, and this is probably because we're not doing, well, I'm not doing design tables all of the time, so I just go to the insert. Again, I'm going to let it auto create. And because I've set up that basic structure, it's going to find most of my length, width, height, or depth as we go. I'm going to allow the model edits to update to the design, and we'll just leave the defaults on for the selection. And it launches. Hey, we got enough of it. That's all right. I was waiting for a license. No, you don't have. Oh, no, you can't do that. All right, so let's spread that out a little bit so we can see all of it. Oh, yeah. Come. All right, so we have the configuration name, blank cell, description. And I moved that over just a little too much. Not enough. Well, now I'm not going to be able to get it to go back. Come on, you can do it. And then if you're not used to my zoom style, I am a middle scroll wheel, twitchy zoom kind of thing going on there. All right, so I want to do the, let's go 4. You're going to let me have it. There we go, 4 by 4 by 4. And I'm not going to worry about the description, the part number, the name. We're just going to go 4 and tab and 4. And if I wanted to populate these out, I could drag these down and it would go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way to as big as you want to make it. The naming a little more challenging. There are times where I've used Excel to go find these and write them into text fields, but again, that's a little bit higher than maybe want to go. So if I double click, I did not place a name on this. So let's see, does it add it? There we go, D1 at sketch 1. So that one can stay 0.5. And then we'll go to 1 and 2 and 3. All right, so again, just quick examples. We can build this out. You can also add sheets and do your calculations and then reference those cells from the first one. But the rule is no gap and your configurations are on the first sheet. That's where it's going to look. Go ahead and hit OK, or basically click out of it. Keep my fingers crossed. It added the 4x4. All right, so again, our test is to go to the 4x4. Part 1's still showing up there. So that didn't quite go over to, that's thinking. I better not make it mad. We'll give it a second here. There we go. Show configuration. So now we have the 4x4 with the 3-inch hole through it. The 3x3 with 2-inch and the 2x2. All right, and then I'm going to finish up. We'll need to save this somewhere, so that's a good spot. And we're going to create an assembly. And we'll bring in, I really want to mess with that intake. All right, so we're just going to add a couple more of these to illustrate how this is functional. And oh, nice. I hardly ever get a double control select there. So coincident, and we'll just dial these in. Nope. Let's go there and concentric. And I'm not sure which one that was, so hopefully it will move. There we go. Rotates a little bit. Ah, the coincident went the wrong way. Well, for me anyway. Flip mate. All right. And then let's see, is it popping up there for the isolate? Yeah. All right. So the point with the assemblies, then I got a few too many there, is that when I grab this and I decide I want to go from a 2x2 back to the 1x1, all I have to do is click. I'm not right clicking and replacing that entity and having to go out and navigate to it, find it, do all those fun things, and say, you know, I want the 3x3 and I want the 4x4. All right, and my assemblies on this demo always end up Art Deco, so yeah, we'll throw those in there. Now they're separate, so you control the configurations within your part, and then the assembly is managing each of those parts on its configuration level. So if I brought in a pin to go inside of these boards, then I would have to also go in and say I need the 1/2-inch pin, I need the 1-inch pin, and manage those. So also with the suppression states, if I add a configuration at this level, okay, that's good enough. Then we can go back and say, okay, part that one gets suppressed. Okay, that one goes to transparency, which is more of the visual thing that I was looking for. What else did we have? Let's do the little flyout. And on that one, now I did not tie those display states, so this probably isn't going to do exactly what I expected it to do. But as we go back to the default, yeah, so since I'm managing those parts from the assembly, I could control those display states through the configuration, and I would have to set up similar in the part. So If we went back and linked the display states to the configuration, that probably would have worked a little better. So let's see, if I go back in, we're still in the default. We'll go back to the default display and everything's shown. Oh, the transparency. Yeah, turn off the transparency. Okay, so one gets suppressed, one's in transparency, one's in the hidden line. So you can do all these kind of weird things. Probably the place that I use the display states most is a work in progress. When I'm going back and forth, I have a lot of components and I want to see just how these two are interacting. I can do a hide. I don't really want to suppress them because I mess up the relations, the mate relations, or I mess up something going on in the solid bodies. But I want to be able to narrow it down to just 2 parts or 3 parts. Then I can go back and forth through display states, and I really don't even have to switch between configurations, or if I don't have any configurations, just go back and forth. All right, and so I've gone over. Any other questions? And I'll turn it over to Joe. All right, we'll take a quick transfer and try it. Thank you. Is everybody sufficiently confused and overwhelmed? If not, I haven't done my job.
We'll never drop that.